And welcome, everybody, to the Punch the Timeline podcast. My name is Jarrod. If this is your first time, thanks for listening. If you're a loyal subscriber, thanks for coming back. If you're new here, we love comics. That's our thing. I love comics, and I love talking about comics. I'm also doing a project on Substack called DC in My Lifetime, where I'm reading every DC comic that I can from when I was born until 1992 when I started reading. You can find that project on punchthetimeline.substack.com. The sound quality on this is a little below my standard because we had a little bit of a technology snafu, and so I had to run down to the shop and do this interview in person on my Zoom recorder. So you're going to hear Matt really well. You're going to hear me not so well. So let's take a look now at my interview with Matthew L. Price. Matthew L. Price, thank you for being here. Let's talk about it. First of all, let's get your credentials out of the way.
Okay.
Journalist.
Yep. Kind of still am a journalist writing for Comic Shop News, but wrote for the Oklahoman and was at the Dallas Morning News for a little bit. Was at the Arkansas Democrat Gazette in Little Rock. About a 20-year primarily journalism career.
Comic shop retailer, as we are recording live here in your studio.
Speeding Bullet
shop.
Comics in Norman, Oklahoma. My wife and I have owned it for 27 years. And then, of course, it was a comic store for 8 or 9 years before that, where I worked in high school.
Screenwriter.
He filmed The Post-Human Project, Oklahoma Film of the Year in 2014. This is available on Amazon Prime, pops up on Tubi and other places from time to time. Roku, yeah, it pops up different places. And then a handful of short films, which are harder to see, but occasionally pop up at festivals and different things. My film, The Grave, which was based on my comic, The Grave, screened at Comic-Con International, but it's, like I said, you kind of have to catch it at festivals these days.
Impressive. And comic book writer, which is why we're here today. But before we go to that, we are from Oklahoma. It is a small, small world. When you owned the shop and we first started talking, it took us a couple of months to realize that you went to school with my cousin. Yep. And depending on if you went to school there your whole life, we went to the same school.
At some point, possibly. I mean, I went to Washington for about third grade on.
I was there. I did kindergarten, so I was 1985, 1986.
Yeah, we probably overlapped just maybe a year there.
Yeah. So we both went to the same elementary, or you were probably in middle school by the time I was.
Well, that was it. I think that was probably my either 4th or 5th grade year. I'd have to do the math.
We went to elementary school together.
There you go.
All right.
Didn't even know it. So much later.
Small world. So I want to talk about Comic Shop News and how you got to be involved with them.
Yeah, well, it's kind of, though there's a longer and a shorter version. I'll try to do, a middle version. I did journalism school, and when I was in journalism school, I was looking for internships. I was reading Comic Shop News at the time. This is in, the 90s. And I called up Cliff Biggers, who was the publisher at the time, and talked to him about, do you guys have internships? Which they did not really, but he gave me a lot of good advice on pursuing comics journalism and just pursuing journalism in general and other things that he had done. He'd also been a teacher and owned a comic shop, so we had some things in common. So, and then I've been friendly with Cliff off and on through then, although we don't talk all the time, but we'd been friendly as I had started my store and he had still had his store. And then when he sold Comic Shop News to Dave Whitting, who currently owns it, I was actually probably a couple years into his owning it, but I thought, he's done some interesting things. I should just reach out and say, hey, as a guy who does journalism, I think you're doing some interesting things, putting some different kind of stuff in there, trying to change, Cliff had done it for, 20, 30 years. And so obviously making that seem fresh and different, yet while still maintaining the fan base you had. I mean, that's a tricky thing to do. So I reached out to Dave and said, hey, I think you're doing some interesting things. And we got in a conversation back and forth, and which eventually turned to the fact that I had done journalism for a long time and had a store. And longer story short, I guess ended up with pitching him some articles. So I started pitching him some articles. I became a contributing editor to the magazine, which I've done for about the last year. And then at some point, we're leading up to issue 2000. He's wanting to just kind of what's a big bang kind of thing we could do for 2000. Something we had discussed is that he owns some of these old Ideal Toys properties, which I think he got in an auction, including Team America. And I was like, well, I was kind of a fan of that comic. I mean, I know it wasn't Watchmen, but I liked it. I said, I think there are fans out there that if we brought it back in the right way, might be a way to get some attention on issue 2000. So we talked about that, and we eventually decided to do that. And I kind of gave him an overview, and we talked to a few different writers when we come in and doing it. And eventually Dave decided, you've got the idea for doing it. You should just write it. So I did scripts. We ended up eventually getting Josh Hood in to draw it and Lorenzo Scaramella in to color it. I think that has been a great team. Through some of Dave's connections, Howard Chaykin did that first cover for us. So I guess that's the behind the scenes sort of nuts and bolts of how it all happened.
All right. So for those who don't remember Team America,
so few people would not remember that.
My favorite part was when you were texting me about it, you said, not the movie, the comic.
Yeah, not the puppets.
The old Marvel comic.
Yeah.
Would you like to give a brief recap of Team America when it was at Marvel? Like, what's the concept of Team America? And then I have questions about what characters and what you retained in the property.
Sure. Well, the short version is when Dave bought the toys, he has the rights to things that were toys, basically, but he doesn't have like the Marvel characters. So we have like basically the rights to a team called Team America who wear red, white, and blue motorcycle things and have different cool motorcycle races and stunts and whatever. And then also there's a black suited person who is tied into the line. So those are kind of things we have rights to. I sort of purposely I had read the Team Americas both as a kid and then again as an adult, but I purposely didn't go like deep dive back into them because I'm like, I'm going to do more of not exactly a sequel, but a sequel in spirit of like what I thought this was, probably more than what it actually was. And so like in my head, it was like, okay, there are these motorcycle racers and like spy stuff happens and there's some weird supernatural mysteries involved. And so it's kind of like, Stranger Things meets the X Games, which may not be actually true if you reread the comics. But in my head, that is kind of what had happened. So that's what I made sort of the sequel to.
Now, I won't get too much into it, but in preparation for this, I read the Marvel comics, and you can tell that it was a property that they got to push toys, like everything 80s. The cartoon was to sell the toys. It seemed like the thing that had to be done, but it wasn't consistently. It's like, who's writing Team America this month? Because the creative team changes. There's only 10 issues, 10 or 12.
Yeah, 12, I believe.
12. Okay, there's 12 issues. The writer changes at least 4 times. The artist changes at least 3 times. But looking at it through the lens of someone who was a child in the 80s, I can see why they had the book.
Mm-hmm.
But reading it as a 45-year-old man, it's so. When they first brought this to you, did you have to sit and think about it, or did you have ideas?
Oh, it is almost more my fault that this is happening than anyone. But I hope that's a good thing for people. Dave, like I said, Dave owns a handful of properties, like Green Ghost and Kabbalah and some different things. And he just showed me this catalog of, here's some toy brands that I own at some point, if you think of anything to do with them. And so I had looked through those. And then when we were talking about 2000, I'm like, I think the thing to do, kind of leading into almost America's 250th anniversary, that's kind of in the back of my head. Kind of the fact that like, I've seen a little bit of nostalgia for Evel Knievel type stuff, which Team America has a loose tie to.
Very much.
And just also kind of like seeing things in YA fiction that are kind of about, young sports teams and things like that being popular. Like, I think there's maybe something there if you just kind of distill it into the parts that work in 2025. So that was that's kind of what I was doing. But yeah, basically I pitched him on like, let's bring Team America back in issue 2000. And he's like, okay, let me sell me on it. But I mean, once we got on board, he had a lot of great ideas, and I think it's been a great collaboration working with Dave as a publisher and then our artists and everything. But it's probably as much my fault as anyone's. But I hope that people are like, holy crap, this is cool. Again, there are people who like motorcycles or people who like motocross who maybe aren't reading comics. This could be potentially an entry point for them, something that they might like. I tried to make it very action-y.
Perhaps a supernatural element.
At least hinted. There's at least hints of a supernatural element, some mystery, we haven't nailed down on the page, this is supernatural, this is not, but we're letting you kind of, maybe it is. You don't know. I mean, our lead character is named Ghost. There's people, her father's missing. There's people chasing them. There's people seemingly conspiring against them. So there's a lot of elements that we are, again, depending on how long it goes, I think the more you can kind of open up that world, open up that door a little more.
So how do you write for a shorter format? Do you, like, when you have this story, are you thinking I'm going to get X amount of pages and stretch this out? Was there a set amount of issues that you were supposed to fulfill?
Yes, basically. So we talked about doing a 6x4, and we ended up adding a 5th to the first issue just to give it a little more room to introduce the characters. And there's a few different ways people do comics, and I'll probably say some of this wrong, but I mean, there's people who do like a 878, and some people, like how they kind of space their acts and different things. So I just had to look at it like, okay, we've got 25 pages. If it's, essentially first 2 parts are act 1, second 2 parts are act 2, but you also want each sort of mini act to be a thing in of itself that feels like its own comic. So I tried to write 4-page comics that felt satisfying on their own, but that built to a whole story. And hopefully I did. That will be, I suppose, up to the eventual readers to determine. The people who have read, for the most part, it isn't a huge amount of people, but we've sent the first couple of chapters out to a few people who seem to like it so far. So fingers crossed that ends up being the case. I mean, I think the art is so good that sells a lot of it.
It's just,
yeah. And Lorenzo Scaramella did some really interesting things with the colors too. So that helps. Like, I look a lot smarter the better they are, You look like a better writer the better your artists are, and they did a great job, I think.
So is there a point where you continue this if there's enough demand, or?
That's the hope, I believe. I think we all would like to. I think everybody involved would like to do more. So there'll be, 6 issues across 6 weeks in Comic Shop News, which will be 25 total pages. There's a few different ways we could go from that. I actually have I have a loose plot out for about another 5 of those. So do we do that 5 more times in Comic Shop News? Do we do it as individual issues? Do we do it as a trade? I don't think that's been determined yet. I think we're kind of going to see how people respond, see what people like about it. I think there's something to be said for having a serial comic in Comic Shop News as often as we can get away with it, because I think that just gives you one more reason to get in there. Also, speaking in sort of a larger sense, I feel like it's gotten harder on the internet to kind of get into like, well, what is coming out and what am I interested in and whose opinions do I trust about these things? So I think if just looking at Comic Shop News gives you one more way to look at, okay, here's some things that are coming to stores. Oh, and I get to read a comic too. That just kind of, I think, helps everybody to some degree. Helps the store owners sell more stuff, helps fans be exposed to more properties, and hopefully they like the stuff that we're introducing to them as comics as well.
So how can retailers get Comic Shop News if they aren't already?
So they're available through Lunar, and I think you can just do a order and search Comic Shop News, and I believe all the issues are still available that have the Team America in them at this point. It starts with 2000, and it will go through 2005, so it'll be a 6-part thing. And yeah, they come in bundles of 100. And some stores charge amount for them. Some stores, they are free. I would say, either way, they're a pretty good deal. However you get them. And if you're a person and you're like, my store doesn't carry it, there are some online retailers that will some will add it to your purchase over a certain amount. Some you can just pay, I think, $1 or whatever it is and add it to your order. So there are ways to get it that are not, even if your store doesn't carry it, but I would encourage you to go to your local comic shop and say, hey, do you have Comic Shop News? Would you save me a Comic Shop News? Because I'm interested in this story.
And when does 2000 come out?
December 17th.
December 17th.
So yeah, it's a little Christmas present for you. Just December 17th and the 24th, you'll get part 2. New Year's Eve, you get part 3. And then the next 3 parts in January.
Excellent. And Howard Chaykin can cover.
It's really pretty exciting for me. The guy who drew the original Star Wars, created American flag. Part of the hook, I think, for how we're doing it was on the cover of Comic Shop News 1, there's an article about American flag. And so I think David reached out and said, hey, you're on the cover of Comic Shop News number 1. Wouldn't it be cool if you're on the cover of 2000? And so they talked about different ways what that might look like. And he's like, well, would you be interested in doing a cover for Team America? He was, and he did, and so that's been pretty darn cool.
That is,
I think I can say, and I don't know where exactly you'll see it, but I think I can say, because he's posted it at least. There is a Javier Saltares illustration of the Highwayman character, and Javier is known for his Ghost Rider, so that will show up somewhere. I don't know if that'll be on a Comic Shop News or some other way we'll do it, but Team America fans, that's out there. That's coming at some point.
that is fantastic. So Team America Racing through Comic Shop News. I would like to talk real quick about your Substack.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
You have some different articles that come out on a fairly regular basis, unlike myself, who I have the more Eric Larson approach of, whoops, sorry, here's 3 months of content. But I find really fascinating is your retailer posts where you're talking about what's selling, what sells best, because I just don't see the things that are in the top 10. They're not something that appeals to me, but it's interesting to see what is selling and just what the nuts and bolts of being a retailer are.
I'm glad people are enjoying it. I wrote a column for 22 years for the Oklahoman every week, didn't miss a week. And so when they decided they were changing their format and we parted ways, they let me write a nice farewell column. But I was like, I still think I have enough energy to do this every week, and maybe I can get to 25 years in a row without missing a week. So I'm just going to keep writing columns. And sometimes there's more than one column a week, but I am definitely doing the, one column a week thing that is numbered. I put the number on there just to keep myself going. As far as I'm going to try to get to, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, 25 years would be next February, and then I'll see what I feel like at that point. So, but yeah, but as I started doing it for Substack and not for the paper, I started thinking, well, what can I do different? Because when I was doing it for the paper, I didn't publicize the store most for the most part. I didn't, you know what I mean? I kind of kept it a little bit separate. But now it's like, well, what insights do I have? Some of the insights I have might be, what does running a store look like in 2025, or what does owning a store look like in 2025? And we got on a new point of sale program about a couple of years ago now, which could kind of spit numbers out of me different ways. And so I thought, well, that might be interesting, especially since you don't really get diamond charts anymore. I mean, I think Comic Hub maybe does one, and ICV2 maybe does. So there's a few that kind of have numbers parsed different ways, but there's not just one big chart. And ours obviously doesn't reflect everything. It reflects what's happening in one small store in Oklahoma. But I think, well, this is a snapshot of what's happening here. And if you have a store, you can compare it to your store. If you're just interested in what does this snapshot look like, here's what this snapshot looks like. So, I mean, sometimes I'm like, I feel like, well, this probably says Batman too many times, but it just kind of is what it is.
The charts always are. It's like Batman, and the.
Yeah. And one thing I think is interesting that you used to get in things like Comic Values Monthly and some of the other Overstreet magazines, and I guess you still get in Overstreet annually, but you don't see as much as people talking about the back issue sales. And I usually, what I've kind of done, the way I've decided to do it, which I just made up, I could be wrong, is just kind of look at aggregates, like monthly aggregates. Like, we sold more Superman comics this month than Wonder Woman in the back issues. And sometimes I can kind of, oh, there's a Punisher trailer, and all of a sudden there's a bunch of Punisher comics. I think it's kind of interesting. You can kind of track little things that happen. Like, one month I was like, why is Doctor Who on here? But they had dropped some kind of Doctor Who trailer, and it had interested enough people that had popped in and bought Doctor Who. Now, we're not a huge enough store that I don't think somebody could just, if somebody really wanted to mess with the numbers, they probably could. Like, if you're like, I have $500 and I'm going to buy all these Little Orphan Annie comics, yes, you could probably make the charts look a little weird if you wanted to, but I don't think anybody's thinking, well, this is going to be super scientific anyway. It's a snapshot of what happened in one town 1 month. So
honestly, if you had done this 6 months ago, it would have been when I bought all those issues of New Adventures of Superboy.
Yeah.
That would have been your number one back.
Well, I mean, again, I'm not saying there wasn't a month where Superboy could have showed up, and I might have made up a reason that wasn't Jarrod just deciding one of because there are times when, it's just somebody's collecting something, and if, it's not like we sell enough stuff that one person can't skew something by buying a big chunk of issues. But I think it's still, for the most part, interesting, and as long as people aren't taking it as a scientific gospel, which of course, I mean, the numbers are accurate for what they are, but it's a snapshot.
And you were once nominated for an Eisner for this store.
Oh, we actually were nominated twice, and then we went through the whole process in 2005. I went to San Diego and all that to, go to the award ceremony. But and then we were nominated another time and didn't do all the shenanigans to go with it. But yeah, so it's nice to be nominated. So I just sort of feel like nomination is kind of like winning for me. You know what I mean?
Very cool to say.
So I almost feel like we've already, to the degree that I'm ever going to win, we've already won. Any kind of recognition is wonderful. If anybody ever wants to nominate us, that's wonderful. I'm happy with what we're doing. I'm very proud of it.
I don't know, I'm a little biased, but this is the bar. This store sets the bar for me.
We appreciate it. And I look, I don't want to downplay. I do think we have made a difference in the people's lives. I've had people come in and say, I was a young kid. I wasn't going to read anything. My mom brought me in here, got me a Spider-Man comic, ended up reading well enough to get out of high school and get my college degree. And now I'm bringing my kid to get him a comic book. People have said stuff like that to me, or like, hey, I was going through a tough time and I came here and I, kind of put my head in Metropolis or Gotham City for a few hours and was able to get through having a tough time. So that's the stuff that means a lot to me, is that we've made a difference in the community here. And, there's studies obviously to get the more like reading material you have in your house, the more likely you are to be literate, which is more likely you are to be able to have stable employment. So I just feel like the things that we're doing here are trying to make the town better. And I hope that we have. And I've definitely heard feedback from people who we have individually influenced in a good way. I mean, at least the ones that we influenced in a bad way don't come back and tell me. So that's good. So I don't want to say I'm not very proud of what we've done, because I am very proud of what we've done. And, very proud of what Dan's accomplished as the manager. A lot of times, Dan and I will be talking, we'll be like, we like this choice. So hopefully that's, on some level, we're making a comic book store that we like, and hope that appeals to other people as well. But, we've always been very big on the literacy of it and the reading of it. And not that we're opposed to collecting or different ways you can do collecting, but we're just very focused on that sort of the art plus reading equals interesting literacy.
Love it. All right. I got a couple of rapid fire questions for you.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite series that you're reading right now?
There's a lot of good stuff out. I like The Rook Exodus. I don't know if you've read that, from Jeff Johns and Gary Frank, about wardens on a planet that gets abandoned by the people who live there. And there's these handful of wardens trying to kind of keep, I guess, the place under control to some degree. Their helmets allow them to talk to the animals of the planet, but civilization is fracturing as the leading government organization is pulled out. And so they're just trying to kind of hold it together, make the alliances, different things. That's why I'm really enjoying that. A lot of the Ghost Machine stuff is interesting. Redcoats also from them. Ended last year, but Local Man was definitely a favorite.
When that ended, I was like, what? Because for me, Nightwing was here.
Yeah.
And then Local Man was here. And I said, when Nightwing, because they were wrapping up.
Yeah.
When that
the Tom Taylor stuff.
I was like, when he's done, Local Man's going to be the best book in comics. Yeah. And then they're like, psych.
Yeah.
We did an Images of Tomorrow and now we're done. I'm like, come on. I love that book.
It was such a good book. But the one thing I give them is they had a great ending, which is so hard to do in comics, that they really, I think, stuck the landing. So that was, strangely, Rachel, my daughter, and I both had that as our favorite book, I think, of 2024, which is like, we don't have a ton of overlapping tastes, but we both really like that book. So that's another one that I really, really have liked in the recent past. Absolute Batman's been a good book. I know you were saying you maybe don't read a lot of stuff that's on the top 10, but it sort of takes, it's sort of like a manga kid's version of Batman a little bit, because at first I read it, I'm like, this is a different vibe. Mm-hmm. But then I think, to me, it's like Scott Snyder and as Hayden Sherman, I think. He may be doing some of the fill-in issues. I may be getting some of this wrong, but they're just taking a very different, to me, a very Japanese influence vibe, like sort of like taking the Japanese influences that Miller had and then kind of pulling farther on them. So that's a really interesting book to me as well.
I think I read the first 6 issues, and I've been hearing enough that I'll probably jump in and read a few more. Do you, and this is a very loaded question, do you have an all-time favorite artist? Or do you have a top 3, a top 5?
Goodness. I mean, so many, right? I mean, my go-to answer is probably Frank, just because if you look at my shelves, I've got a lot of Frank Miller stuff on there. So he may be my go-to answer, but Byrne was a big influence. As a younger reader, in Perez. I think there are great writers and artists coming out now. Mark Gruenwald I liked as a writer. His ways is sort of pulling disparate threads throughout Marvel history and then tying them together into something they probably weren't ever supposed to be, which is also kind of something Jeff Johns did when he was at DC really interestingly, like pick up this thread, pick up this thread, pick up this thread. I like a lot of what Jeff Johns is doing now too, again with the Ghost Machine stuff. So yeah, I don't know. If I had to say one artist, I'd probably say Frank Miller. I don't know if that's always my answer, but I think you probably, if you were like, well, let's look at your bookshelves, that would maybe be like, well, there's certainly a lot of Sin City here. So,
Great. Do you have a series or a story that you like come back to every year, like a comfort read?
really, right now, this is quite every year, but I try to read the James Robinson, Tony Harris Starman when I can, because that's just
book.
love that series. One of my maybe my favorite series. Yeah, I was gonna mention James has a new book, Los Monstros, which is like about a PI in like a world full of like universal monster type characters, which is really good right now. But yeah, James Robinson, that whole Starman series, love it. Reread it when I can, but it's very long. Like for years, I would like do my summer blockbuster reading. I'd reread Infinity Gauntlet and Crisis on Infinite Earths. It's kind of it's time for summer. Let's reread the big blockbusters. I haven't done that as much recently, maybe because the MCU is kind of pulling all that stuff out. So I was like, oh, I'm kind of seeing this in a different format. And then they did a really cool Crisis on Infinite Earths on the CW shows. So I haven't gone back to them as often, but that used to sort of be my every year. But then right now I would say I do try to like, but if I feel like it's been, very long, I'm like, maybe it's time to start up Starman again. Cause that's, I feel like just one of the great stories that has, beginning, middle, end, and
The
terrific
respect
artwork.
that they have for the character and for James Robinson, that they're just like, this is yours. When you're done, it's done. It's on the
Yeah.
shelf. And I do hope that they are doing that sequel series, or not sequel series, but that
The Japan interlude.
Yes.
Yeah.
That has been my favorite book since, probably, I'm trying to remember the year.
It came out in what, 98? I don't know if you started reading it right.
I read it about 2 years in.
No, it was before 98. It was zero. It was right after 0 Hour. So yeah, it was like 94.
So I probably started in 96 or 97.
Yeah.
I was like, this guy, like Jack Knight is what I wanted to be when I grew up.
Yeah. Well, he was a very understandable character. I don't know if you ever read James Robinson's Firearm that he did for the Ultraverse.
Few issues, yeah.
But I mean, I thought that was almost like kind of Jack's a different character. It was almost kind of a trial run of like, well, okay, well, I'm going to give him some interesting quirks. we're going to layer things onto the character in a more dense way than they usually do it in comics. And I feel like Firearm is kind of his trial run of like, let's give them these interests and and it was more of what you usually get in a novel.
And the dialogue would just, it's like there's the story, but then there'd be like these one-offs, like they'd be talking about how they're worried that the Shade's going to blow up the city. And then he'd be like, sometimes I grow a goatee just for the hell of it. There's just like these occasional like tangents, and I always found that fascinating. So
yeah, great series.
I mean, I read Sandman Mystery Theater with like a group on Twitter in the before Twitter times. It was like this great way to come into bits of Starman because there's the crossover, and then there's a little bit of the characters. Excuse me.
That's another great series. My only real complaint with that is it feels like it ends. To me, it feels like it ends a little abruptly, but I guess the timeline is it's getting you up to the timeline is what it is, right?
Yeah.
At some point, you run out of runway.
It's just like the war started, and then it's like that gives you enough time, where it's like they went to go deal with the war. When they came back,
things are different.
What are your goals for 2026?
Well, that's a great question. I'm very excited to get To America out there. And of course, the second 3 parts will come out early 2026. So seeing that kind of complete will be good. I'd like to get another couple things worked on or out there. I've done a handful of the Grave comics. I had one come out late this year. I'd like to get maybe another one out, and maybe in a more, I don't know, wide format. I had an issue come out with Okie Comics when Jeff Provine was doing that. So that was distributed throughout Oklahoma, and then I've distributed issues here. But maybe there's a way that I can get that to even more people. I'd like to see that maybe happen. So I'll probably work on some more Grave stuff. I'd like to work on some more Team America stuff, depending on how that spins out. And then I'm just, hopefully can, whatever success we have with this, leverage it into some more writing opportunities and in the meantime, keep the store going, keep that to be a good, exciting place for people, and, maintain. I'm not doing a ton of journalism at the Substack, but the weekly column and do some film reviews and different things. I'm still a member of the Oklahoma Film Critics Circle, so I'd like to stay active there, review some films and things of that nature. So, I don't know. I guess I'm pretty open for 2026 so far. I'm looking forward to it just being as good as we can possibly have, right? Just trying to stay as optimistic as possible about it. But yeah, but hopefully this can stair step into some additional writing. It's so hard. You probably know this. You can like work on stuff and then it finally comes out and it seems like you've been doing a whole lot, but it's like, well, yeah, that was over. Sometimes it's over a much longer period of time before people actually see it. So
I do appreciate with your Substack that there's like a local level where you're like, here's what's going on in Oklahoma. There's an overall like, hey, here's this movie that's coming out. Here's what I think about it, or here's this event that's going on in comics. And then again, there's that retailer level to it. So it's like with your Substack, you have a little bit for everybody. That's my
thanks.
plug for you.
Thank you. I try to. I know a lot of it's probably like if you're in New York and reading it. And I've looked at we do have some California, New York, and Atlanta, Georgia readers. And I'm sure sometimes when I'm like, here's something happening in Oklahoma, they're like, oh, but I'm hoping that like it's still interesting in some ways. Like, well, maybe these local people would be of interest to you if, you're more aware of their work or whatever. I do think we have some great creators here that don't necessarily get a ton of hype all the time nationally. So, I guess any bit I can help them.
A fun fact about your store, an established comic writer has worked here.
Yes. And he loves that I bring it up. But yeah, Sterling Gates worked here through college and then went on to write for Supergirl primarily, also some Flash, some World's Finest, War of the Supermen, some different stuff for DC. And then I wrote a couple episodes of the Supergirl TV show, also wrote as a staff writer and a story editor, I don't know what all, on the Flash TV show. And has written some Spider-Man cartoons and some other things. I think maybe a Super Dinosaur cartoon as well. He's got all kinds of interesting credits. So, and co-wrote the Post-Human Project movie with me that we did back in 2014. So
now is the time for you to plug both yours and your store's social media platforms.
Okay, let's see. The store is Speeding Bullet on Facebook, Speeding Bullet Comics on Instagram, and then I forget what we are the other places, but probably some version of Speeding Bullet or Speeding Bullet Comics. I'm not super active on Twitter right now. I'm doing a little bit on Blue Sky. My Twitter is Nerdage. My Substack, you can find, I think, at Nerdage is my username on Substack. And then I think I maybe did Nerdage at Blue Sky too. I should have looked all this stuff up. As you can tell, I'm very engaged in my social media right now. And you can find me, I think, on Facebook too. If you want to follow me there, feel free. A lot of this stuff, you're going to be like, this guy just mostly talks about his kids in Green Lantern, but
That's life. Once again, thank you to Matthew L. Price for stopping by and talking a little bit about his latest project, Team America Racing. If you are the social media type, you can find us on Threads, Blue Sky, and Instagram at Timeline Punch. In the land formerly known as Twitter, we're still there, but I'm not active. So anyway, Timeline Punch everywhere, and punchthetimeline.substack.com for all the latest in DC in my lifetime. This has been Punch the Timeline. My name is Jarrod. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful day.